Welcome to the Roy Morgan Weekly Update. For the first time this year, the ALP has drawn level with the coalition on two-party preferred terms, and the Roy Morgan Weekly indicators are all heading in the right direction. This week's Roy Morgan poll shows the ALP gaining ground on the coalition, with the two parties now locked at 50-50 each on a two-party preferred basis. If a federal election were held now, the result would be a hung parliament and too close to call, with the ALP or coalition requiring the support of minor parties and independents to form a government. This week's boost in support for the ALP came after lower than expected inflation estimates released by the ABS that showed inflation at 2.4% in the 12 months to December 2024. That's down 0.4 percentage points from the previous quarter. The closely watched trimmed mean, which strips out volatile items like food, energy and petrol, also dropped 0.4 percentage points to 3.2%, its lowest since December 2021. The falling inflation has raised hopes among many that the Reserve Bank will cut interest rates in mid-February. A cut to interest rates would do two things. It will provide relief to millions of mortgage holders around Australia that have endured 13 interest rate increases since early 2022, and at the same time provide a clear boost to the Albanese government's chances of re-election. Government confidence, whether people think the country's going in the right or the wrong direction, has marginally improved this week. It's up 1.5 points to 78.5. But of course this is still well below the neutral level of 100. A clear majority of 54% of Australians still say the country's going in the wrong direction. Only 32.5% say the country's heading in the right direction. Consumer confidence, or ANZ, Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence, increased 2.5 points to 88.5 this week, with an increase in buying sentiment and views of the Australians' economy basically driving the increase. The lift in confidence drove consumer confidence to its highest level since May 2022, almost 3 years ago. And following the better than expected inflation estimates released by the ABS, this week's inflation expectations dropped, down 0.4% to 4.6%. So that means Australians are now expecting annual inflation to be 4.6% over each of the next 2 years. And this is the lowest inflation expectations have been for 2 months since early December, after a significant spike in petrol prices over the Christmas New Year period. And now we look across the Tasman to the political situation in New Zealand. In January, the latest Roy Morgan poll shows the main governing National has had a good summer period and boosted its support by 1.5% to 32.5%, and is now 4% ahead of the opposition Labor Party on 28.5%. This marks 2 months in a row of increased support for National and follows the Reserve Bank of New Zealand's decision to cut interest rates in late November to 4.25%, the lowest rate for almost 2 years. For National's governing coalition partners, the news was good for New Zealand First, which increased 1% to 8.5%, its highest level of support since the 2023 New Zealand election, although support for ACT dropped 4% to 9%. Overall, now 50% of New Zealanders support the National-led government, including 32.5% for National, 9% for ACT and 8.5% for New Zealand First, while 46.5% support the parliamentary opposition, including 28.5% for Labor, 11.5% for the Greens and 6.5% for the Maori Party. And finally today to our northern neighbour, Indonesia, and a look at smoking rates. They've soared since the pandemic. The latest Roy Morgan Indonesian survey shows almost 54.5 million Indonesians now smoke. That's up by almost 10 million from only 4 years ago, and up by over 11 million from a decade ago. It's equivalent to 35% of Indonesians aged 18 plus that smoke, up from 30% only 4 years ago. The interesting fact is that this surge in smoking is not driven by young people, it's driven by Indonesians aged 35 plus, who now comprise 68% of all Indonesian smokers, or 36.8 million people. That's up from 22.6 million a decade ago. And importantly, younger Indonesians are less likely to smoke today than their counterparts 10 years ago. For further details on the smoking habits of Indonesians, or in fact anything you'd like to know about Indonesians, visit the Roy Morgan website. And that's a wrap. Thanks for your interest this week in Roy Morgan's latest results. I'll be back next week to bring you the most up-to-date readings on consumer confidence, inflation expectations, voting intention, and we'll be looking at business confidence. Thanks for listening.